Yeah, so this is our last day together of our intensive. It's going well for you. It's really wonderful to have a whole day together. That's such a gift. A gift for ourselves and a gift for each other to come together like this. It feels so great to be with you in a group, right? So I'm just kind of basking in that experience a little bit. And then I talk. A one-page talk. So as usual, let's begin with just a few accounts of your experience yesterday, working with the activity, right? And how did that work out for you? What did you discover, if anything? Maybe you didn't discover anything. It's possible.
I found the meditation that you sent out just wonderfully clarifying and helpful.
The Anapanasati Sutta.
Yeah, and I used...
So fun to say.
I avoided it. So.
It's
Anapana.
Sati.
Sati.
So sati is the, right, mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's mindfulness of breathing. Anapanasati.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so go ahead.
That's all really, just that sitting in those periods with that specific format was just wonderful.
Good. Yeah, good. Good. It's a very, very useful thing to have in your meditation toolbox. Yeah. Stephanie.
I found, for me, a softening, sitting with that intention to be mindful and aware without distraction. At first I wanted to be distracted the first couple of minutes, but as I just continued to sit there, it felt like my whole body just kind of eased into this opening. And it's not like I had any big awareness or anything. It was just very much a presence that I was present. And it was very, it's funny, it was very energizing. It wasn't tiring. So yeah.
So that's two important things that you point to there. First of all, our addiction to distraction. Right? We're agitated to seek out distraction. Yeah, and this quality of presence that is nourishing and energizing rather than depleting and exhausting. We discovered that the distractions actually exhaust us. It's actually energy draining. But we're not aware of that, and we are still addicted, right, all of us, to what we've, mistakenly, I think, developed as a culture. If anything, if we are famous for anything, it will be that distraction. We've created more distractions, larger variety of distractions, and more compelling distractions, and we've devoted more attention of psychologists and technologists to creating absolutely addictive distractions. As a culture, that's what we've done. That's what we decided to do. Go figure. Anyone else? Yeah, Joan.
Well, going on that, distractions, so I did the focus practice, and it was such a joy because I had set that time aside to be focused, and I enjoyed the pleasure of being focused rather than allowing distractions.
Yeah.
And the work was just very joyful, and getting things done that needed to be done.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, Michael.
Yes, so the most important thing I learned yesterday was that I had no idea what shikantaza meditation was. And the concentration practice that I had been doing, I thought was shikantaza. And so everything changed after that.
So
Were you going to ask me something? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I said, how so?
Uh, well, in a bizarre way, I feel more concentrated in everything that I'm doing, which is sort of not what I had expected. And I saw in a very clear way how, as you just pointed out, addicted to distraction I am. I've been working on that over the last few months, and it just sort of got heightened that, oh, I can do this other thing and just watch the distractions rather than feeding them and nourishing them and almost enjoying them, but not quite.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, when you stop and really analyze how much pleasure you're getting out of the distraction, it's not very great, is it?
No.
You really think about it. Yeah. This little focus practice, 25 minutes, has a name. It's a whole model. A lot of you may be familiar with, called the Pomodoro method. Yeah, 25 minutes of total focus. Nothing disturbs it. If something irreparably disturbs it, so someone's at the door, you have to go get the door. You have to start over. So that ultimately, I've done a lot of practice with that, and I've done a lot of teaching my students that method, which they have said has saved their lives, because it enables them to build the capacity to focus. Right? It's not very demanding. 25 minutes isn't very long. If you said half an hour, your brain would be like, but it's like 25 minutes. Okay. And then if you put them back to back, you have a 5-minute break in between, and after maybe 3 or 4 of them, you have a 20-minute break, and that break is mandatory. You have to get up, get away from your screen, go do something else, make a cup of tea, have a sandwich, whatever. So through my own empirical research, I discovered how astoundingly productive it made me, and how much I enjoyed and appreciated it, how joyful it was, to have a complete experience of attention to a single thing, and a single thing that mattered to me, something that I really wanted to be doing. So anyway, yeah. So that you can play with that, you can keep practicing that and see, there's no need to make it longer. Instead, put a couple of them together. I would sometimes say in the morning, I'm gonna do 3 Pomodoros, grading papers, and something like that. And that would be tremendously productive, tremendously effective. So see what you find out playing with it yourself, but keep that sort of basic model, 25 minutes and 5 minutes break, which is what they have discovered over lots and lots and lots of millions of people trying this, is the magic formula. Yeah.
There's a couple of hands raised.
Okay. Jeanette?
Hello. This message is on my screen, talking about distraction. So I had some interesting experiences. So first, I took a period at work at the very beginning of work when I was actually ahead of the game. My supervisor thought I had done less than I had. So I thought, oh, this is great. I'm not in a hurry. And I was able to just focus on my work and enjoy every moment of it. And then later in the day, I tried to do another one, and she gave me, when I do a translation, someone reviews it, then I review their review, and I have questions I have to ask. Anyway, it should be really quick. The document was due right away. And the reviewer had messed with the formatting, and the tables were all over the place. And I was like increasingly anxious that my supervisor was going to be saying, what on earth is taking you so long? And I got to the point where I couldn't focus at all. And I was like, yeah, I need to go take a break because I can't even think. I'm so stressed out about the fact that I feel like this is taking too long. So it was fascinating to notice that how I frame it really, really alters my entire experience of it and my capacity for it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and you can see how that kind of pressure can be disabling, right?
It was.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Rosemarie?
So I did not have a chance to do it. I had all sorts of car things to deal with because of the accident. But in the evening, I was what I was struck with in your conversation with Ellen was the description of shikantaza, like Michael was saying, and I decided to try, and it was quite amazing because it was kind of like an open system. Something comes in and something, and also the labeling. I was able, what was coming in, I could label. So those two things together just felt really wonderful. So I really appreciate the description of it and the opportunity to approach sitting, in this, for me, new way. So thank you.
And then even the labels have to fall away.
Well, yeah, well, next
That-
week.
that- If you're labeling, you are practicing, and you're actually practicing a concentration practice. That's not shikantaza.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
right. That's
It's
right.
actually another form of concentration practice, a completely valid one. But that's what you notice. If you're thinking birds chirping, siren, you're already in a labeling mode, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, well, thank you for that subtlety.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you spell Pomodoro?
Pomodoro, just like it sounds. Yeah, Pomodoro. It's Italian for tomato.
Yes, it is.
There's the expert on it. It's because the guy who developed it used a kitchen timer that was in the shape of a tomato. That's what. Okay, Lisa.
Okay, you answered one of my questions about concentration, because even labeling is concentration. And, sometimes I feel like I have a hard time telling when I'm concentrating, because does it count if I'm paying attention to my distractions?
Mhm.
If you know what I'm saying, if being aware of your distractions is concentrating. But you know what I really have been wondering about is what is the difference between training and manipulating our experience? Because we talk about in Zazen, we don't manipulate our experience. So training, it seems to me, some of our training strategies are a kind of manipulation.
Yes, they are. Training is one form of manipulation of experience. It's not shikantaza, right? Because shikantaza is no manipulation whatsoever. But concentration practices, training, we are manipulating our experience. So what you talked about in the beginning about distractions and being aware of your distractions, that's half the training. The other half is the willingness to return to the focus of concentration, right? So yes, you can practice your distractions, and we all do, out in the world, but that's not training. So practicing your conditioning only strengthens your conditioning. That's all it can do. You have to watch what you're training. Right now, you're training your attention to be willing to return to what it is that you're concentrating on, or in the case of shikantaza, to drop everything once again in the openness of shikantaza, which has no manipulation whatsoever, right? So one of the things we think about in training is, what am I training? What am I training? Am I training myself to pay attention to the distractions, which we all do? Or am I training myself to be self-regulating and able to manage my own attention? to match my intentions for it. Make your attention match your intention. That's what we're training. And that's, the word sati means recalling. It means recalling what you want, recalling what you want to be paying attention to, recalling what you want to be accomplishing, recalling what you want to be present for, right? So does that make sense? Yeah.
Tremendously helpful, thank you. I
Yeah,
mean, it's common sense, but it's easy to get into. So, yeah,
yeah, right.
helpful to have feedback that kind of makes it coherent, all of these teachings coherent, yeah.
Hopefully that's what the feedback is doing. I mean, or no, maybe we're making things worse. Okay, last question.
When you train with Anapanasati Sutta, what I've noticed is you go through all these little steps, they're concentration steps, and then what you're left with is Shikantaza.
That's what it opens out to,
Yeah.
ultimately. Yeah, that's what the letting go is.
That's what the letting go
At
is.
the end, the last step is the letting go, everything. But the previous steps prepare you to be able to do that. So if you do those steps, it's a sequence, if you do those steps in that sequence, then you are preparing your mind for that letting go. Exactly. Yeah, that's why we sometimes use it in conjunction with shikantaza as a sort of a on-ramp. It's kind of an on-ramp. Yeah. Okay, great experiments. Thank you. It's always helpful for all of us to hear what each person's experience actually is. And today we're talking about prajna, wisdom. This is the only one of the paramitas that has a single word translation that's completely faithful to the wisdom. So translators appreciate, we have to kind of approximate, but with prajna it's pretty clear. So this has been a wisdom practice for over 2,500 years. It's been enduring, it's served people for 2,500 years. So we have to think about what is wisdom. We all have an idea. I know what it is, right? I know what wisdom is. I know when I see it. But I'm just curious what you associate with that word, wisdom. What do you think that word actually means for you? What's your sense of it?
Can I answer?
Yes. You're way over here. I can hardly see you. You have to speak up like that.
Not
Okay.
knowing,
Not knowing is wisdom.
yeah.
How's that different from just being stupid? Just my question,
Yeah, no, that, probably thought about that.
Were unable to come to any conclusion?
It's a continuing question,
Yeah,
what the difference is,
that's right.
I don't know.
Richard,
I believe wisdom has a quality of discernment.
discernment.
You're noticing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're able to discern.
Michael is on.
Michael?
So when I think of wisdom, I think of interacting skillfully, both with myself and with others.
So you think of it as skillful activity, skillful action.
It's a skillful interaction. It doesn't necessarily have to be action or even words.
Do you think you can be skillful without being wise? Jessica thinks so.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wisdom to me initially goes to, the wise elder, right? But then I think about children who come with wisdom, right? And so then to me it means an authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah, because I think if you're being authentic in what's arising to skillful means, there's just something about authenticity for me.
Do you know that it's not possible for people to act inauthentically?
Now, that's an interesting thought, but it's not possible for people to act inauthentically.
They are always authentically being themselves.
Mm.
They have no choice. So a person who's lying is authentically being a liar. That's who they authentically are in that moment.
But don't we want to cultivate wisdom and authenticity of wisdom?
Now you're getting to a kind of circular definition, right?
Yeah.
That wisdom is the authenticity of wisdom, right? So this is the puzzle that we have, you know, how do we, and I made dictionaries for a living for 5 years. And one of the things I learned is that all of our definitions are kind of provisional. They're always inadequate. They're always partial. You're trying to, as my boss said, you're trying to build a corral around meaning where everything belonging to that word is in the corral, but everything that is not belonging to that word is clearly out of the corral. So it's one of the ways people will do that is with describing what they think is the opposite of that thing. So it's the opposite of wisdom. And our name Appamada is an opposite of the word pamada, right? Which means reckless, heedless, you know, careless, almost unconscious. Yeah. So this is I always say that every argument comes down to a definitional argument. We're always arguing about the meaning of some word. So it's always about, I don't call this a marriage, do you call this a marriage? It's always going to come down to a definitional argument, you know? And it's funny how exhausting that can be, because definitions are rhetorical. So I always love when people say, well, let's look in the dictionary. Do you know how dictionaries are made? By asking a bunch of people. So there's a kind of collective agreement that marriage means this, but who knows, you know? And it's always rhetorical because it's always has a purpose and an audience. The purpose of a dictionary is to give us general idea of the meaning of the word for the largest possible audience. But anyone who tries to use that word in a technical way knows it's a joke, right? So this is why when we're looking at these paramitas, we always get tangled up in, what does this mean? You know, what does it say? What is generosity, really? You know, what is the definition? So it's important because we're trying to cultivate something. What are we trying to cultivate? That's the question. If we don't have any sense of what we're trying to cultivate, we're just sort of wandering around, right? So our question is, you know, how does it get acquired? As you say, sometimes children say something very wise, but children are not wise. They're young, but sometimes they'll say something very wise. They don't have enough life experience to be wise yet, right? They have some insight. That's what you get, is a bit of insight into something. Like my son saying, why do people who love animals eat meat? You know, like sort of wise. So anyway, this is our question in cultivating our training, right? So, so I think you need to know that in Buddhism, wisdom has a very technical meaning. It does not mean a person who knows a lot. It has nothing to do with knowledge. It has nothing to do with skills, actually. It has nothing to do with most of the things that we generally think of wisdom around. It's extremely important in our tradition, and especially in the Mahayana tradition. The Prajnaparamita literature, the literature about the perfection of wisdom, is vast. You probably couldn't read it in a lifetime. It's a huge amount of literature about the perfection of wisdom. We have this short distilled form of it when we chant the hymn to the perfection of wisdom at the beginning of every service, and at the beginning of the Heart Sutra. That's what is happening, right? So this is important to understand. There's a distinct way that this word is used. And if you want a great book that gives you the flavor of this perfection of wisdom, Mother of the Buddhas is the book by Lex Hickson. Anyway, I'm going to give you Wright's explanation because it's very specific. And we like things that are specific, right? The sutras that communicate the Mahayana teachings are justifiably called the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, because throughout this impressive body of literature, wisdom is the primary topic of discussion. In the mythology surrounding the tradition, wisdom is the mother of the Buddhas, since it is wisdom that gives birth to enlightenment, and it is wisdom that nourishes and sustains the Bodhisattva's compassionate involvement in the world on behalf of all beings. What then defines wisdom in Mahayana Buddhism, of which Zen is a school? Although wisdom is understood more in terms of a certain comportment, a particular way of being in the world, than it is in doctrinal or conceptual views, ideas are nevertheless the essential starting point for the practices of wisdom. Therefore, the Heart Sutra, the most compact version of the Wisdom Sutras, begins by claiming that those who wish to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should view things in this way. What is that view? The view in question is shunyata, the Mahayana principle of emptiness. Wisdom is the capacity to envision and work with the emptiness of all things. Therefore, the sutras maintain that the Bodhisattva's home is deep thought on the meaning of emptiness. Surprising, isn't it? It's not a skill, it's not an activity. What emptiness means is best explained in terms of what it is that things are empty of. All things are empty, the texts claim, insofar as they lack their own being. Own being is a technical term, svabha, for the quality of being self-generated or self-possessed. Things in possession of their own being, things with self-nature, are not subject to conditions, influences, and change. They are just what they are without respect to other things or time. The central insight of emptiness, then, is that all things lack this characteristic. Nothing generates itself, nothing stands on its own, and nothing just is what it is forever. If nothing controls its own being in this way, then in Buddhist terms, all things are empty. Everything arises because of causes and conditions, stays because of causes and conditions, disappears or vanishes or declines or decomposes because of causes and conditions. Claiming that all elements of existence are empty in this sense, Mahayana Buddhists took the word emptiness to name the character of reality overall. 3 early Buddhist principles are brought together to help define the Mahayana concept of emptiness: impermanence, dependent arising, and no self. So in the large sutra on perfect wisdom, we have this explanation. When he thus surveys dependent arising, a bodhisattva certainly does not see anything that is produced without a cause, nor does he review anything that is permanent. He reviews nothing as a self, a being, a soul, a creature. All things are empty insofar as they arise dependent on other things, insofar as they are impermanent and subject to change, and insofar as they therefore lack a permanent essence, an independent soul or self. Wisdom is the ability to see how all things are empty in this sense, and to transform one's relationship to everything accordingly. So here's the warning label that goes on that thought. The Buddha would say in sutras, if anyone is not terrified hearing this, they are a true bodhisattva. Note that this does not mean that Buddhists believe nothing has any substance. Why, Joan?
Bye. Sorry to leave.
Or that nothing exists. That would be the error of nihilism, which the Buddha specifically declared as a wrong view. So here we are with emptiness, but things existing. As the reader advances in understanding, enlightenment, the Buddha, and even emptiness itself are all declared to be empty of own being. They arise dependent on factors beyond themselves. They are impermanent and change along with everything else. They therefore lack a permanent, independent essence or nature. Even these principles of Buddhist thought and practice are thoroughly empty. Wisdom is profound insight into this universal state of affairs. In spite of the negative connotations of the word emptiness, however, it is important to recognize that emptiness defines how things exist, relationally and impermanently. It is not, therefore, the assertion that things do not exist at all. What does not exist is a fixed essence to anything, a center that always remains the same, a condition independent of all conditioning. Nothing, the sutras claim, possesses its own being in this sense. And yet, things exist just as they are. So what I feel about this is there are two ditches we can fall into. Nihilism, the belief that nothing exists, therefore, and essentialism, the idea that things have a separate, permanent existence, not dependent on causes and conditions. The Buddha declared his teachings the middle way that steers clear of these ditches and offers a radically different view of the universe and our place in it, our path together with all existence. It's not a metaphysical or philosophical concept. However, the Buddha encouraged us to put it to the test in our own experience, to practice not in order to believe, but to realize it for ourselves in our own bodies, hearts, and minds. It is the key to our liberation. So I asked Nate to come and help us be more wise, thinking about wisdom. Nate, because Nate is a teacher of teachers, a teacher of schools, and a teacher of districts.
Yes.
That are all devoted to teaching. So it's like Russian dolls, right?
Yes.
Nate is also a parent of a young man who was in the lotus position in the womb and was born that way.
To be extracted, yes.
Yes,
It's
yes. A longtime Sangha member, a council member, board president. So he's had all of these different roles and functions in our Sangha on the path of Dharma transmission, and has such a strong commitment to our Sangha, to the Bodhisattva vow, and to the Dharma. So I wanted to explore this, sense of wisdom with you a little bit this morning. And so I had some questions. I always have questions. The first question that I want to talk about is what makes this quality, this sense of emptiness, relational rather than just an individual understanding?
Well, if we take really seriously the idea that there is nothing is fixed, nothing is durable, then everything is kind of constituted by this flux. And once you get a sort of felt sense of that, all there is the relations that we're existing in inside of a particular moment in time. So sometimes when I'm thinking about this, it's sort of mind-blowing to think about. Even the nouns we perceive in the world are always in flux. If you look at a table, we think of it as a stable, sort of durable thing. And yet if we were to investigate and zoom in a little bit, we'd see electrons and particles whirling all around. And so for me, it's sort of a simple way of understanding that we're constantly in flux, in motion, and that it's not just relations between humans, but that we're constantly relating to our context.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And to understand that part of our struggle and suffering comes from our struggle to make something permanent, or our struggle to believe that something is permanent, that it is actually in dynamic change all the time. So it causes us to suffer because we come up against the hard reality, right? That we must face, that things are not permanent, that they don't have some separate independent existence.
I think for me, my Dharma gate, or my gateway into practice, was the end of a marriage, the end of a relationship. And what I realized in that is the ideas I had about myself, who I was, that I thought I had a sort of fixed, constituted self, were not as true as I thought they were. And it was devastating to realize that there was no there the way that I had thought. And I didn't know what to make of that. And there was no there in the substance of this, what I thought of as the substance of a marriage either. So that sort of collapse into, was the starting point of experiencing that.
As Joko said, it's the perfect place to begin. When you come to her and you say, I don't know who I am, everything's broken, I'm destroyed. My world is destroyed. I have nowhere to go. I have nothing to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Yeah, that's the perfect place to begin practice. A lot of people come into practice with just that sense, you know. So you might as well sit down, right? You might as well sit down, get quiet. See what's going to unfold from there. Yeah. So I know that you're very particularly interested in this question of how do we foster wisdom in generations to come?
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of the damage that's resulting from that failure that we have.
Yeah. It's
on us if we're not bringing our young people along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sort of, my felt sense is there's a real lack of attunement, so that our ecosystem right now, like you were talking about, is so hell bent on distraction, and curating a set of novel distractions to meet your fleeting preferences. That's how we're interacting in the world, and teaching kids to untether from that and navigate that is kind of terrifying. It's terrifying to see what we're actually doing in schools on a regular basis, is sort of reinforcing some of those blind tendencies to go achieve and strive so that you can buy the next thing that will distract you for a while until you go achieve and strive some more. So there's a narrative there that I find disquieting. So,
and an environment.
Yeah.
So, you know, my sister's grandkids are like, our parents say we have to restrict our screen time, but they're on the screens all the time.
Yeah.
They see the model around them.
Yep. And with a 5-year-old at home, I understand when you just like want a little quiet. It's so easy to click on a screen. Like, I haven't talked to my wife in days. So it's
that wise.
Yeah. And so trying to figure out how to navigate all those tensions.
Yeah. So we have to, you know, take the backward step, I think, and think, what are we doing here? What are we instilling? How are we raising the next generation that supposedly will take care of us in our old age? But who knows, you know, they'd be too busy with their games. Yeah. So this is another question I have for you, which is, do you think wisdom can be a collective activity? That is fostered in community, a sangha, a school?
Yeah. I think it's emergent in that way, in that it has a quality of emergence. In fact, I think about in our community, how many times have wise actions arisen out of the relationships, conversations, and even tensions between people, so that it sort of surfaces as a sort of mind unto itself, where wisdom can emerge. It seems to be a property of a certain kind of quality of relating, where so I think it absolutely can. And I've seen that happen here and in the schools that I work with and other places.
We have to make it explicit that that's part of the aspiration of the community, I think. It has to fuel our conversations. It has to be the environment in which those conversations happen. In my view, you know, so that means we keep reminding ourselves, you know, this is the sati part of community. Like, we keep reminding ourselves, this is what our intention is in coming together, is to have more wisdom. So my last parting shot with my faculty when I left the academic world, the last faculty meeting, I said to them, remember, we come together as a faculty because we have different perspectives, because we have different views, so that we can make wiser decisions, not so that we can fight. We come together so that we can have wisdom about how to help the students, about how to better our teaching, you know. That was kind of revelatory to them, unfortunately. Yeah, so I do think, I feel very strongly that it can be a collective project. You can walk into environments and realize this is an unwise community. they're headed in the wrong direction, they have the wrong values, they're creating, trouble for themselves and for the people they come in contact with and in the world. But conversely, but I do think we have to cultivate it, we have to train and cultivate it.
When you see, because I know you've consulted with Sanghas and other places, when you see organizations, groups of people make that turn, what is it that they tend to do? What are the moves?
Well, there's a variety of ways. They can have unwise leadership and get themselves headed in that. This is the Jim Jones problem, get themselves headed in the wrong direction. Those of you too young to remember, Jim Jones was a cult leader who took everybody to Africa, and they ended up all committing mass suicide. So that's the direction, the unwise direction, bad leadership. But also when members decide that they're going to set themselves against each other, and that leaders are almost helpless when that decision happens. It doesn't take very many people to decide that we're now going to be backbiting and criticizing each other and judging each other and blaming each other. It doesn't take a lot of people to start moving things in that direction if people are not continually reminded that about what we're cultivating. Disagreement is one thing, but toxic behaviors are another. And so part of the role of leadership also is to spot where there's problems that are going to impact the whole system and to intervene. Yeah, but I think that's part of what I see, and they're predictable lines, like people, leaders misbehaving sexually or misbehaving financially or power abuse, but equally people who are well-intentioned but judgmental in ways that make it hard for the community to just exist in its aspirations, So they're always demanding more, always, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why don't we have a prison program? Why don't we have a hospice program? Why don't we have a family program? Why don't we, there's always a sense of dissatisfaction that gets fomented, and that also is unwise. Yeah. I think that's very helpful. Thinking about our Sangha, thinking about the ways that we want to continue to cultivate wisdom and not let things go off the rails, which they can do. Outside conditions can cause that too, so we're in a very upsetting environment right now, the larger culture. Almost everyone I know is upset one way or another. And so for us to continue to cultivate the wisdom and equanimity that can hold us steady in the midst of these storms around us, that's part of our work to do together too.
I was thinking about it when, I think, Rosemary, when you were asking about labeling and that sort of process of returning, I think in the community, in the Sangha, it's a process of returning to the aspiration that mirrors that same thing that's happening on the cushion.
Yeah, and it's not a one and done thing, there are all these dynamic changes happening, some people leaving, some people coming, storms outside, people undergoing life changes and upsetting transformations and things inside. And so that we need to be, I think, maintaining that sense, that this is something we cultivate, and we have each other to help us. So if one person is really, completely swept away, we can hold that person, and we can wisely support them. Yeah, that's one of the functions of community, I think, because isolated, we can get really in a dark place or in a really bizarre state of mind. And that's why we need each other. We can get desolate, despairing, I'm reminded of when Ron Kurtz was giving a talk, the founder of Hakomi, at a conference. I've told this story before. And at the conference, he invited a demo. So there's 400 therapists at this conference, and me, not a therapist, but 400 therapists at this conference. And so he said, does anyone want to do a demo? And this young man raised his hand, probably like Jess's age, raised his hand, said, yeah, I'll do a demo. So he came up on the stage, and Ron said, what's your name? And he said, Chris. And he said, well, Chris, what brings you here, basically? And Chris said, well, I'm just graduating with my master's in social work. And I look out at the world and there's so much suffering. And I don't know, I can't fix it all. I can't, I just don't know what to do about all this suffering. And Ron said to him, well, I don't know what you will do, Chris, but I can tell you what I do. And Chris said, well, what is that? And he said, I try to heal the suffering of the person who's right in front of me. And he said, so would you close your eyes? Would you mind closing your eyes? And Chris said, okay. And he said, I'm going to say something to the audience, if you don't mind. He said, okay. So he turns to the audience, 400 therapists in this room, and he says, anyone who can show a little kindness and who feels like they can help relieve a little bit of suffering, raise your hand. Well, that's 400 hands, right? And so then he turned back to Chris and he said, well, Chris, open your eyes. And as Chris is looking around, he says, you don't have to do it alone. So much of the time we get caught believing we're the ones who have to do it. Okay. So anyway, that's that sense, we're doing this together. And okay, I think I do have just a question for you, which is there anything else that you want to say about this?
I say lots about it, but I'm really drawn to the image that I discovered in some of Dogen's writing, and it's been used in other places, of the tuning fork. And I think of the tuning fork and the tuning as the practice of wisdom. Sometimes for me, it's helpful to have a provisional little metaphor or image, and that idea of the tuning fork and saying what's needed now in this particular moment, breath by breath, moment by moment, interaction by interaction. And
just
incredibly
a
useful.
tuning.
And just a tuning.
Yeah.
It's needed.
There's a resonance there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can feel it. I mean, cognitive scientists talk about goodness of fit.
Yeah.
You can feel it, right? That fit.
Yeah, it's, I think I thought of wisdom as something knowing enough stuff that you can then apply things.
Right,
and,
I thought so too.
Right, not so much anymore. Now it's about this, knowing stuff is useful, but a tuning's better.
And skills are useful.
Skills are useful.
Yeah. And I think of Oscar Wilde's definition of wisdom, which is the sum of our mistakes. Which is but seriously,
yeah.
To know, you have an idea of the stuff, but to know that you need to pay attention to the person in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and you can draw on what did not work in the past, and what has not worked for other people, and that summation also enters into it somehow.
Well, that's the training program, the mistakes we make. That's the training. Yeah. It's, as we always say, good judgment is the product of experience, and experience is the product of bad judgment. There you are. So returning to this, finally, last theme of emptiness as the heart of wisdom. This comes from the Diamond Sutra. Thus shall you think of this fleeting world, a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream. Okay.